So we're going to start this evening in child's pose. So just as with any yin class, just make sure that you're happy and comfortable. Now you can sit just down on the heels, or you can straddle a bolster. If that's the case, then you would sit on the end of it if you're using it. And we're going to bring the hands underneath the body and then underneath the head and let ourselves sink down. So I want a relatively close knee position, so a little bit wider than hips, but not excessively. And the heels are riding around to the outside edge of the hips. So it just turns the legs a little bit. If you find that that's not comfortable, you can actually lift up higher and bring the bolster or the rolled up blanket behind the back of the thighs and the calves. And it just changes the angle for you and releases a little bit of pressure. So that's a bit tricky this evening. And if you find it easy to get the head down to the floor, you might want to take the hands towards the back of the mat so you can let the shoulders kind of rock round and release. And then from here, let's breathe gently. And we're going to slowly take a deeper breath in, bring the hands forwards, press into the floor to slowly lift ourselves up. If you can, you're going to come up onto all fours and then tuck the toes underneath and bring the heels underneath the sitting bones. And you might find that you want to keep your hands on the floor, so stretching out the back of the toes. You might feel comfortable enough to sit up nice and tall. I'm only going to be here for a minute. I'm going to try and keep the body nice and upright and allow the spine to lift. And then we'll release again. As we do, I'm going to take the block, bring that underneath my bottom, and slowly bring the soles of my feet together out in front. So that's where my knees are. My feet are about a similar distance as my thigh length is, just enough so that the soles of the feet together. I'm going to rock out a little bit from side to side, and then we're going to come into something called a butterfly pose. So I'm going to lean forwards gently. Allow myself to very carefully roll the spine down. Now you might want to take the elbows out. Some people like to take them on the inside. Some people like to get their elbows down on the floor and take them underneath the thighs and the calves. But whatever feels comfortable to you. And we're going to see if we can let the head hang as well. So it's a little tricky to breathe. But there is space in the back. It just takes a few breaths for the body to kind of understand where there's space. we're trying to let the thighs and the knees drop. And we'll take a breath and let ourselves start to draw the belly in and roll the spine back out using the hands to lift ourselves up. I'm going to take the hands underneath the legs and draw them back together again. So I'm not really using the muscles of the legs, just using the arms. And I'm going to allow the ankles to have a little bit of a wriggle around. And then I'm going to cross the legs, but at the shins. So the feet are deliberately far forwards. You're having this front shin bone really following the line of the mat. And then letting ourselves sit up nice and tall. And we'll drop the chin in towards the chest. We're just going to take some half neck circles. So we'll draw it across to the left shoulder, lifting the eyes level, and then dropping the eyes back down to the floor. And taking the chin gently over to the opposite shoulder. And then dropping back down again. So we're not looking up towards the sky, we're just looking out across the shoulder, seeing how that feels, trying to let the shoulders open up. Getting that nice long neck as we let the head drop. We'll come back into the center and let the head lift. We'll take the arms out wide and we're going to bring the left arm across the chest and lock the right arm underneath and then draw the shoulder round towards the center line. We're trying to keep the chest pointing forward, so it's just the shoulder that's coming round. Now take a look at which leg is in front. As you take your arms out wide, see if you can untangle the leg and then cross them over the opposite way. And we'll bring the right arm across and that left arm underneath. Draw the shoulder around. And then we'll release. Now I'm going to come on to all fours again. And you can either straddle the block or the bolster. I'm actually going to change mine to a brick because I kind of know where I want to be. And these come together. The sitting bone is on in my case, the brick, and the heels are a little bit out wide. And I'm going to take the strap and have that close by as well. And once I've done that, I'll take my arms out nice and wide. And I'm going to cross the right arm over the chest and the left arm over the top, keeping the hands out in front of the chest, and then bend the elbows and bring the palms together. And I'm going to see if I can let the elbows sink down in towards my chest. Just draw the shoulders back a little bit, and then breathe. So eagle arms with saddle pose legs. And again, you want to be comfortable in the leg department because we're going to be here for a good few minutes. So just letting the body adjust to you breathing into the back of the shoulders, under the shoulder blades. We'll release the arms back out. And this time the left arm will come across and the right arm over the top, bending at the elbows. See if we can bring the palms together and drop in towards the body and draw the shoulders back lightly. It's interesting that the less comfortable the poses are, the easier it is into them. So this is quite a big stretch. Place off to try and relax the muscles underneath the shoulder. And we'll release. Might need to roll the shoulders around a couple of times. I'm going to stay in the seated position and we're going to take that strap. So we're going to allow ourselves to take the strap into the right hand and lift the arm gently up and let the strap just float round the back of your shoulders. Now, keeping the elbow high, you're going to bend the elbow and let the hand drop down behind the back of the neck, so in towards the nape. And the left hand, you're going to turn the hand out in front and then thumb goes down and we move it around very slowly. Because once we get past the point of our chests, it starts to get a little stronger in the shoulder joint. So bring the hand very gently in, find the strap, allow the hand to walk, fingers can be used to draw the hands closer. Now if you get into a position where the head is being jammed down towards the floor because the shoulders are tight, then use a little bit more strap. Don't have the hands quite so tight. So this is called a cow face arms. Strange enough, once you've been in position for a little while, if you move your elbows towards the back of the mat, you might find it a little bit easier to breathe. It's just like a millimeters that you have to move. The tricky bit is letting the shoulders actually relax to do that rather than trying to hoik them back and holding the breath. Now, it's not unusual for people to notice big discrepancy between one side and the other. We shall find that out shortly. That could just be a result of sort of environment, using a mouse all day long on one side as you release, or it could be an injury that's been sustained in many years previous, and although the shoulder seems to be working fine, there's a little bit of restriction there now. So we'll shake out that left shoulder, and then we can take the left hand up and drop the strap behind, helping the elbow up, drop it behind the back of the head. Take a little time, make some space. And then when you're ready, you take the right hand out in front, you turn the thumb down so the palm is out. And it's a very slow wrap around. Just seeing how that feels in the shoulder to draw the arm round. And then using the hand in towards the strap. And we start to use the fingers to walk it up. I know that myself, I've got quite a few old shoulder injuries, and there's probably about 3 inches, maybe 4-inch gap difference between one side and the other. Now, if I did this on a weekly basis, I would probably see some improvement, but since I do it once every sort of couple of months, it does take a long time to improve. And then again, we're going to release. This time we'll just ease the strap over to the side, relatively close by, roll the shoulders round a little bit. And then we'll bring the hands together, it's interlacing the fingers. Turn the palms forwards out in front of the chest. Allow the hands to lift slowly up towards the sky. Now, ideally, we would get the hands above the head, and if possible, we could let the arms relax back towards the back of the mat. Again, shoulders can be quite tight and a little bit sticky, and just getting the hands above the head can be tricky. If you look at the screen, you'll notice that my hands are probably, another 5 or 6 inches further back. They'd be over the top of my head. And this is about as close as I can get with the hands together, palms up. Now release the hands back down again, nice and gently. And I'm going to lift up onto all fours. So I'm going to move my blocks out of the way. And back up onto all fours to let a little bit of blood flow through. I'll slowly tuck the toes on the left foot, ease the leg out so it feels like it's come back to life, and the ankles and the toes as well. And I'll bring the knee back, the same on the opposite side. So a nice slow movement so that the joint feels happy to stretch out, like it's almost a natural thing for it to do. I'm going to quickly sit back down onto the heels with a narrow stance in the knees, and I'm going to take the block, flat block, and place that just behind the toes. And then draw the belly in a little bit, take the hands behind and see if I can let the knees just drift away from the floor. So stretching the feet out for the last time. And then I'll let the knees come back to the floor. And I'm going to move on to all fours. I'll allow myself to just wriggle out the toes and the ankles a little bit. And then with the toes tucked under, I'm going to start to sit back onto the heels, lift the knees away this time, and just bring that block underneath the heels. And then I'll let the knees move out to the side and the toes will follow. So I start to walk them out very gently. I come into a squat. Now in the squat, rather than having the hands on the floor, if I can, bring the arms so they just rest on top of the knees and then let the chest lift up. So you've got a long spine, looking ahead. Head stays more or less in line with the body. It's a little bit easier for balance. And we're encouraging the knees to open out, but in a way where we let them move rather than pushing them with any other parts of our body. So as we sink down, we're trying to let the muscles open it out. So you can get a mind-body connection to think about the body moving in that way, and it will release a little bit more. Now, because we're here for an extended period of time, you might find that you kind of roll a little bit from side to side. And so you're transferring the weight. And that's perfectly okay. You're just moving around in the hips a little bit. It's a natural consequence of being in the pose for a long period of time. Okay. Now bring hands to the floor. You're going to take a little breath from here and use the hands behind. And slowly take the legs out wide. And again, you might want to just sort of lift the knees a couple of times and stretch them out a little bit. They're going to wriggle a little bit onto the front of the sitting bones and bring the hands onto the shins. You're going to lift the chest up and think about lifting these front hip bones up as high as you can out of the pelvis. And then fold them over the thighs as we let ourselves take our hands towards our toes, because it's called a straddle pose. And if you've got bent knees, that's fine, not a problem. The head hangs, that's okay. You try and get nice and low and see if the legs want to start lengthening out pretty much by themselves. And I'm going to be here for a couple of minutes longer. So the body will start to feel like it opens up. It might be that the body sinks a little lower and the knees stay in their same position, or it might be that the knees lengthen out and the body stays where it is. It does take a form of mental resilience to stay in these shapes, just letting the body sink into the edge. So feel happy with yourself as you regulate your breath and stay in the pose. And just wait. The space that you develop might not be particularly obvious. It could be microscopic. But something will happen somewhere. And then bring the hands onto the floor in front of us to lift ourselves up. And we use the hands again underneath the thighs, just to draw the legs in. Bring the groins back in towards each other. And we're going to take the stirrup pose, or stirred up pose. And I use the block for the back of the head, cushion would be fine. And use the hands to roll into position. Now, once they've got nice and long, and let the knees float in towards the body. Keep the big toes touching and let the knees draw out to the side. Now, keeping the spine very flat and long on the floor. So if you notice that your chest is kind of lifted and your lower back is rounded off the ground, you just want to draw it back down. Get as flat as you can. And then take your hands onto the shins and slide them down towards the ankles. Now, if you're able to, at this point, find your little toes, your big toes very easily, great, you can hang on to those with your index finger, middle finger. Most of us are going to be holding on to the ankles. And then we keep the knees low, and we just take the feet out so that the soles of the feet are to the sky, and we kind of got the shins almost in a vertical line above the mat. And we're trying to keep the tailbone on the floor. So if you focus more on trying to get your hands wrapped around the feet, and it's actually, the hips aren't that ready to open up in that way. And since we haven't warmed the body up, that might be for more of us than you'd be expecting. Then just holding on to the ankles is the way to go. Now, it takes as much effort to hold on to the ankles as it does the side of the feet, I'm afraid. You can keep the spine nice and long, the back of the neck lengthen out. We're going to be here for about another minute. So you might find that the legs tremble a little bit and shake. That's a little disconcerting, but it's not unhealthy at all. It's a good sign that the muscles are stretching and working. So the shaking is caused by muscle synergy, trying to work out what's letting go and what's pulling. And sometimes it gets a little bit confused, and as it gets tired, it gets more confused. So added to that, the body opening up and you're moving into a different space, which makes the stretch different. The whole body gets a little bit overwrought, I think. Probably a nice way of putting it. Take a last breath here, and then we'll just bring the heels back in gently, and we'll slowly let the feet come to the floor. And I keep the feet in close to my body. And this is where a rolled up blanket or a bolster would be handy. I'm just going to take that onto the left side of the body, halfway down the mat. Let the arms come out wide, and we're going to shift the hips over to the right in whatever feels like a natural place to be. You're going to lengthen the leg out on the left, down the center line of the mat, and just bring your right foot on top of that left thigh. And turn the hips over towards the left side, and see if we can bring the foot, the ankle, knee, and the shin onto that bolster or rolled up blanket. So you might have to turn quite a lot to get your body over there. You might even have to wriggle the hips around a little bit more. And then once you're happy with that, we'll see if we can keep the leg where it is on the ground and ease the shoulder down on the right side towards the floor. So again, that might need a little bit of jiggling around to get into the right place. And you can even use that left hand to help keep the right thigh and leg in the place that you want to be. We're going to slowly bring ourselves back. So the feet are on the floor, and we bring the hips back in towards the center line. And we just move that bolster over to the second side. My strap out as well. And then we'll lift the hips and move them over towards the left. Arms out nice and wide. The left foot comes onto the thigh, and we roll the hips over. So allow yourself to ease yourself in. Move the foot, get the hips in the right place. And then when you're ready, you can start to take that left hand out. And if we need to, just wriggle around. Let's do a little bit of creaking and popping. And we'll slowly undo ourselves from this pose. Bring the hips back onto the center line. And we're going to lengthen the legs down the center line of the mat. Allow hands to come above my head and then drop down towards the back of the mat. And I'm going to take this into a banana pose. So I'm going to take hold of my left wrist and then slide my shoulders over towards the right side of the mat, trying to keep the shoulders flat to the floor. And then I'm going to do the same with the legs, so gently move those across. Try and keep the hips flat to the ground. And just let the breath settle in the pose. So there's time for the body to release and open. Now, if it feels possible to lift the left leg and cross the ankles very gently, you can do. But if there's any sign of sharp pains running down the back of the leg or in the lower back, you're going to slowly move yourself back out, because that's the sciatic nerve just letting you know that it's not happy. And we want to keep that little beastie as happy as we can. Carefully untangle the legs and bring them back to where we think is the center of our mat. Do the same with the body. And then move those over to the left. This time we're going to take hold of that right wrist. And when you feel ready, we'll move the legs over to the left as well. But it's important to keep the cheeks on both sides of the body with equal weight, and the shoulders flat to the ground. Again, once you're in position, if it feels comfortable, you can cross the ankles, see how that feels. We'll start to bring ourselves back. Allow yourself to lengthen the body out, so stretch the hands to the back end of the mat, flex the toes, point them away to the front end of the mat, and then we'll release the hands out to the sides and scoop the legs in towards the body. And as the knees come in, we can have a little hug and rock on the spine from side to side. And just check that our backs feel fine, shoulders feel good, neck feels good. And then if that's all okie dokie, just going to roll gently onto your right side and allow yourself to use your hands to press into the floor to bring yourself slowly back up. Ooh. Now we'll start moving a little bit more into our yang. So you can take a little breath, move the block out of the way. Make sure you've got your strap about midpoint down the side of the mat. Tuck the ankles underneath and roll onto the shins and the knees, and just come up gently into all fours. Let ourselves wriggle out the spine a little bit from side to side, so bootlaces are down. And we're going to come into some very nice and easy cat-cow. So just drawing the chest forwards, roll the shoulders back. Tilt the pelvis, let the belly draw in, and spine round out towards the sky. Inhale, draw the chest forwards again, keep the eyes focused where the heart shines. Allow ourselves to lift. A few more rounds. You might be breathing quicker or slower than me. That's not a problem. Now I'll come back into that highest form and just sit gently back onto the heels. Press the hands into the floor a little bit. Ease the head down towards the ground. Take a breath. Draw the belly in. Allow myself to lift back up onto all fours. Draw the chest forward. So cat-cow meets child. Easing back. Just pressing into the hands a little bit to help control speed at a drop. Lift yourself up. Keep the belly drawn in. Let that chest shine through. Take one more round. And then lifting back up. Now we'll come into a neutral spine and just tuck the toes underneath. Now sit on the heels and walk the hands back. So the knees now lift away from the floor. We're going to keep the fingers on the ground, a bit wider than the shoulders. And we'll lift the hips up towards the sky and the head drops into a forward fold. I want to check the feet are hip distance apart and parallel. Walk the fingers in a little bit closer. Let the ribs sit on the thighs. Let the body hang out of the pelvis whilst they press down into the feet and try and lift the hips up towards the sky a little bit. Now I'm going to release the hands onto the hips and lengthen the chest forward, soften the knees a little more to ease myself up. Inhale, hands towards the sky. Bring them through the heart. And then exhale down to the floor. Bring the hands onto the hips again. Lengthen the chest out. And soft, weight into the toes a little bit as I lift up. Hands to the sky. Breath in. Hands through the heart. Draw the belly in, lengthen out. Keep the weight in the toes. It's very easy to roll into the heels and the back of the knees. Hands onto the hips. Lengthen and lift. And then as we bring the hands above the head and in towards the heart, we'll stop there for a moment and just zigzag the feet together so the toes touch and have a little gap for the heels. We're going to start to bend the knees and squash the thighs together. So we're coming into a chair pose. We're going to sit the bottom down a little further and allow ourselves to lift the hands out directly above the shoulders. You can be as wide as you wish, keeping the belly drawn in. And then we'll bring the hands back in towards the heart. Allow ourselves to lengthen forwards, the legs open out a little bit, and we ease down to the ground. Bring the hands back onto the hips. And the knees just a little bit, keep the belly drawn in. So it's stronger on the legs and the lower back to lift up this way. Inhale up. Hands above the shoulders, soften the knees over the toes. Sit back into our chair. Bring the hands in towards the heart. Hinge forwards, lengthen out, drop ourselves down to the ground. Bring the hands onto the hips again. Lengthen the body out. Draw the belly in. Slow lift. And last time, hands above the shoulders. Soften the knees. Allow yourself to sit back. Bring the hands in towards the heart. Lengthen forwards. And bring the hands to the floor. Now this time as we tuck in, we're going to walk the fingers towards the very front of the mat. So we're coming into down dog. And we'll allow ourselves to keep the toes together. You might need to kind of move around in your down dog to get yourself in the right place. That's fine. Just going to move the heels towards the back of the mat, lift the hips up, check the fingers are nicely spread out. All the knuckles are on the ground. I'm going to take a little breath from here. Allow ourselves to ease the left leg up towards the sky. Now we're going to open the hip out a little bit and point the toes away, but try and keep both legs nice and straight and avoid softening into that right elbow. Keep it strong, pressing down that hand into the floor. Ease the foot down to the floor, keeping the leg nice and straight so it just hinges down to the ground. You settle on the breath, and on the exhale, we'll take that right hand leg up. And ease that leg back down again, keeping the leg straight, so it's very much hinging from the hips. We'll take the left leg high. Let the toes point away. Open the hip out to the side. Remember to keep those arms pressing down. And draw the foot down. We've got one more side to go. So right leg lifts. And ease that foot down to the floor. Now, as the feet come to the floor, bring them back onto the center line in your down dog. And we'll take pigeon pose. We'll draw the right knee in towards the chest, and then as we come forwards into plank, we'll drop the knee to the outside of the right wrist. Let the heel sit underneath the groin, and then walk the left foot back a little bit. So to take a bit of pressure off of the wrists, come up onto the knuckles and have the thumbs point forwards. Now lift the chest towards the sky, draw the belly in and let the hips sink, and lengthen out through the back leg. I'm going to be here for a couple of minutes, which is why we want to be focusing on lifting as high as we can. And we're using the knuckle technique just to take a little bit of zing out of those wrists. Imagine that you can lengthen the shoulders out wide. So another way of thinking this is that you've got someone standing behind you with, they've taken your hands in their shoulder, your shoulders in their hands, and they're trying to squeeze you back in and make you smaller. And you're going to push back out into those hands and broaden the chest and the back of the shoulders out. And we keep the heel underneath the groin, and the toes are following the line of the shin, pointing out. That's the easiest and the most natural bend for the knee. And keeping the belly drawn in takes a little bit more concentration. You should just be able to feel the left buttock firing up as you lengthen out through the legs. So if it's completely soft, you can lengthen out a little bit more. Almost there. I'm going to bring the hands down to the floor again, so flat, so they take a little bit of time to kind of let the blood come back into the knuckles. As we're doing that, we'll tuck the toe on the back foot underneath and press the leg away to get it to lift. Roll the shoulders back, draw the belly in, and we'll move slowly back into that down dog. Just bringing the feet back onto the center line. We're going to stretch out for a few breaths here. And then we'll draw that left knee into the chest, come into the plank, take the knee wide, hook the heel under the groin, sink down, and let ourselves walk the right foot back. And again, bring the knuckles into play underneath the shoulders. Broaden out across the chest and the back of the shoulders. Let the heart lift to draw the belly in. I know that I have a less active right buttock, so I can find it in this pose kind of firing up and then dropping off and firing up and dropping off. So it's a good pose for me from that point of view, in that it forces me to concentrate and focus on that set of muscles, as well as drawing the belly muscles in. And that deeper knowledge and working of the buttocks is going to sound very strange, but actually helps with your balance in general. You think about all the weight that's above the buttocks moving around when you're walking, the more efficient the buttocks are firing, the safer we'll be. Take a last little breath here. Bring the hands to the floor again, just give it a little time to stretch out. Tuck the toe on the back foot whilst that's happening and lengthen the knee away, keep the belly drawn in. Ease your way back into that down dog. Again, we take a little stretch. And we're going to bring the knees down to the ground, but we're going to take them as wide as the mat. The big toes coming towards the center. So it's a wide version of child's pose. Sitting down gently. You'll feel the difference in the thighs when we do this. And allow ourselves to lay the chest out and walk the fingers forward, come right up onto the fingertips, and have the elbows away from the ground. And draw the belly in a little bit. Although we're trying to get length in the arms and lengthening out the body, we are trying to keep the shoulders soft at the same time. So sometimes they don't mutually work together. You lengthen the arms out and the shoulders get very tight. So allow yourself to breathe into that space. And we'll place the palms onto the ground again and just start to walk the fingers in to lift ourselves up. We're going to come into a seated twist, so we'll need the block, if you have one. And just place it underneath our bottom. gently back and lengthen the legs out. We're going to spend a moment in Dandasana, so just drawing the flesh out a little bit, lengthening the legs out, being careful to avoid pressing the knees down. So we want to think about sending the heels away and drawing the toes back. And as we sit in Dandasana, the body is very upright, and these hip flexors, the muscles at the top of the thigh, they tend to tighten up a little bit. So we're going to spend a little time focusing on those, and imagine that we've got a pair of hands just like pushing the muscles back out and just rolling them down towards our toes. So everything is lengthening out and keeping relatively soft and happy. And then we'll release from here. So we're going to take the right foot underneath and out towards the left hip. And I'll draw the left foot across. And I want to bring the foot in close to the body. So I can use the hand to kind of hoist it in a little bit. And have the foot flat to the floor and the knee high, both sitting bones down on the ground. I'll take the right arm high, rotate the body around gently, and then counterlever the arm and the thigh towards each other. Taking the other hand behind the hip to the floor. Try not to lean back too much. You want to be as upright as you can. So draw the belly in and lift yourself up at the same time. And if you can, let that bottom leg relax if it's joined in with everything else. And we'll release from here. And we'll untangle and let ourselves come back into the second side. So just drawing the left foot under and out. So the hips stay square to the front of the mat. That left thigh points straight down the center line. And then the right foot comes over, close in. Settle. Allow the knee to be high. Draw the belly in to lift up a little bit as you take the hand up on the left side. Rotate round. Gentle counterlever. You can look over the rear shoulder if that feels comfortable. And then we'll release from here. So I'm going to lengthen the legs out. We're going to come into that cradled pose that we looked at or spoke about at the beginning of the class. So for me, I'm going to take a block and my somewhat worn out old bolster, which could be a thickly rolled up blanket. And then I'm going to allow myself to just sit on the end, but about a fist behind the back. So you should take the hand behind Just check there's a little bit of a gap between the bolster and myself. And I let the feet come together. And this is where the strap comes into place. So I want the buckle, if you have one, to be sort of in the middle of the body, not down by the legs. And I'm just going to take that round the outside of the thighs and then the knees, really. And then start to draw as that buckle just slides through, and tighten that up. Now, the feet are a distance away from the body, so for me that's about 15 inches or so. You want them to be comfortable distance away so that the legs can just hang out. So the straps ideally not having any twists in them, because that will just dig into the flesh and stop the blood flow. So you should be able to sit here quite happily, and you know, the legs aren't going to go anywhere. They feel nice and safe. And then we'll just take the hands behind and let ourselves use the hands to rest back. Now, you're going to be here on the ground for quite a while, so if you need to put any extra layers on, do so. I'm actually going to turn the heating on. And I'm going to grab myself a blanket as well. That's because I forgot to bring my sweatshirt with me. So we're going to be in this position for about 7 minutes or so. And then the option will be to change into Shavasana by using the hands underneath the back of the thighs and just bringing the legs back together again, untangling the strap and moving into a fuller version. But if you are happy and your legs feel very happy in this cradle position, then you can stay here for the duration. Not a problem. So when you're ready, we just lie ourselves down carefully onto the floor. You will notice as you lean back that it feels quite strong on the groin to start with, and then it settles a little bit. And then I'm just going to bring my blanket in, take my hands out to the side. And this is actually a restorative pose. So make sure that in your position that you lengthen very lightly the pelvis and the tailbone away. Just, you might want to take a little bit of a lift and lengthen it out and then settle it back. And if you can, have the palms facing up. The eyes closed, just check the jaw is soft. Slow the breath down, let it start to come from the belly. Now this is where we start to consider whether we want to stay in this pose. As I said before, if you do wish to move, use the hands underneath the thighs to lift them back into the center. Untangle the strap very gently, and then lengthen the heel at a time out, corner edges of the mat. If you're happy to stay in this pose, then let yourself rest. Now we're going to slowly start to consider moving out of these poses. If you're in Shavasana, very soft to wriggle your toes, fingers, ankles and wrists. Take some longer breaths and a long stretch out before you draw your knees into your body. If you're in the cradle position, you can take the hands underneath the back of the thighs. On an exhale, just use a little bit of strength in the fingers to start the legs moving back together and draw the heels in. Untangle yourself from the strap. And if you're on a supported platform as I am, you're just going to stretch the arms out. If you're flat to the floor, you can draw the knees in towards the chest. Having a little rock and a hug. And then everyone will roll gently onto their right side and just stay there for a moment. We'll draw the knees in towards the body, the head tuck in as well. And let yourself relax into the floor, so toes, ankles and knees soften. And then we use the hands into the floor, just to press on the exhale to come up. And ease ourselves around back to sitting. And roll the shoulders around. Little wriggle from side to side. Bring the hands in towards the heart as you take the breath in. And as you close your eyes, let yourself to gently bow to the floor to seal your practice. And then on the inhale, draw the spine back up. Open the eyes. Namaste. Thank you very much for joining me.